The last drop of formula spluttered from the can, leaving a hollow echo in the silent apartment. Clara stared at the empty container, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. Her daughter, Lily, barely 6 months old, stirred in her crib, a soft whimper escaping her lips. It was a sound that usually melted Clara's resolve, but today, it only amplified the icy grip of panic. The eviction notice sat on the counter, a stark white rectangle mocking her dwindling bank account. $200. That was all she had left in the world, barely enough for another can of formula, let alone the overdue rent. Her phone, a battered relic, buzzed with a low battery warning. She scrolled through her contacts, a desperate prayer on her lips. Her sister, her only close relative, was out of the country, unreachable. Friends? She'd exhausted their generosity months ago. Pride, a stubborn beast, usually kept her from asking, but Lily's hungry cries were a more powerful force. She typed out a message, her fingers trembling. I know this is a long shot, but I'm desperate. I need $2,000 for rent. Can you help? She'd meant to send it to an old acquaintance, someone who'd once offered a casual loan. But in her haste, her thumb slipped. The message vanished into the digital ether, sent to an unknown number. A wave of nausea washed over her. She'd probably just embarrassed herself to a stranger. Lily's whimpers grew louder, escalating into a full-blown cry. Clara scooped her daughter up, rocking her gently, her mind racing. She had to do something. Anything. The phone buzzed again, a new message. Her heart leaped, then sank. It was a reply to her accidental text. Who is this? And why are you asking me for $2,000? Clara's cheeks burned. Humiliation. She typed a hasty apology, explaining her mistake, the wrong number, the desperate plea. She didn't expect a reply. But a moment later, another message came through. What exactly do you need the money for? Hesitantly, Clara explained, her fingers hovering over the send button. Formula, rent, the threat of homelessness. She didn't mention Lily's father, a ghost who'd vanished the moment he learned of her pregnancy. She didn't mention the endless job applications, the childcare struggles, the sheer exhaustion of trying to stay afloat. She just stated the facts, stark and unembellished. The reply was instantaneous. Meet me tomorrow at 9 a.m. The Four Seasons Hotel. Ask for Damien Thorne. Clara stared at the screen, bewildered. Damien Thorne. The name was vaguely familiar, a titan of industry, a recluse whose face occasionally graced the business pages. A billionaire. This had to be a joke, a cruel trick. Yet, a tiny spark of hope flickered within her. What if it wasn't? What if this impossible stranger was her only chance? The next morning, Clara dressed in her cleanest, if faded, dress. She borrowed a stroller from a neighbor, tucking Lily inside, her daughter's innocent gaze a constant reminder of the stakes. The Four Seasons lobby was a cathedral of marble and hushed luxury, a world away from her crumbling apartment. She felt like an imposter, her worn shoes scuffing the polished floors. A stern-faced assistant led her to a private meeting room. Inside, a man stood by the window, his back to them. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark suit that screamed bespoke. When he turned, Clara's breath caught. Damien Thorne. His eyes, the color of storm clouds, held an intensity that was both unnerving and captivating. He exuded an aura of power, a man who commanded respect without uttering a word. Miss Hayes, he said, his voice deep and resonant. Thank you for coming. Clara clutched her purse, her palms sweating. Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Thorne. I'm truly sorry about the text. It was a mistake. He gestured to a chair. No apologies necessary. I read your messages. You need help. Yes, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. But I don't understand why you would. Respond. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. I have a proposition for you, Miss Hayes. One that could solve all your financial problems, and more. Clara's heart pounded. What kind of proposition? I need a wife, he stated, his words clipped, devoid of emotion. For one night. Clara gasped, a flush creeping up her neck. Her mind reeled. A wife for one night. She'd heard stories of wealthy men and their arrangements. But she wasn't that kind of woman. Her independence, hard-won as it was her most prized possession. I don't understand, she stammered, her voice shaking. I can't. He held up a hand, stopping her protest. It's not what you think. My family, specifically my grandfather, is pressuring me to marry. He's gravely ill, and his dying wish is to see me settled. If I don't produce a wife by the end of the week, I stand to lose a significant portion of my inheritance, and more importantly, control of Thorne Enterprises. A hostile takeover is looming, orchestrated by my cousin, Julian Vance, who would see the company crumble for his own gain. Clara listened, her initial shock slowly giving way to a strange mixture of disbelief and a flicker of understanding. So you need a temporary wife to appease your grandfather? Precisely, he said, his gaze softening slightly as he glanced at Lily, who was now peacefully asleep in her stroller. A public appearance, a few stage photos, a convincing performance. You will be introduced as my fiancé, and we will attend a family dinner. After that, you will be compensated handsomely, and our paths will diverge. Compensated how handsomely? She asked, a cynical edge to her voice. $500,000, he replied, his voice flat. And a job, if you wish, within Thorne Enterprises. Something that utilizes your skills, whatever they may be. Clara felt dizzy. $500,000. It was an astronomical sum, enough to erase all her worries, to provide Lily with a future she could only dream of. But at what cost? Her pride? Her dignity? And the condition? She asked, remembering his initial text. You said there was one condition that would stun me. He walked over to the stroller, his movements fluid and graceful. He looked down at Lily, a profound sadness in his eyes that Clara couldn't quite decipher. The condition, he said, his voice barely a whisper, is that you bring your daughter. She must be present, and you must act as if you genuinely care for me, and I for you. As if we are a family. Clara stared at him, stunned. Not what she expected. Not a demand for intimacy, but a request for a child's presence, for the illusion of a family. It was unsettling, yet strangely innocent. Why? She asked, the single word heavy with unspoken questions. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. My grandfather loved children. He always wanted me to have a family. And my cousin, Julian, he's a ruthless man. He will try to discredit me in any way he can. A loving fiancé, a child, it will make my position stronger, more sympathetic. Clara's mind raced. Julian Vance. The name sparked a distant memory of a corporate scandal, whispers of embezzlement and betrayal that had once rocked the city's financial elite. She dismissed it as tabloid fodder, but now it felt chillingly real. It's a lot to ask, she said, her voice still laced with doubt. It's a lot to offer, he countered, meeting her gaze. Think about your daughter, Miss Hayes. Think about her future. The words hit home. Lily. Her beautiful, innocent Lily. This wasn't just about Clara's pride anymore. It was about security, stability, a chance for a life free from the constant gnawing fear of poverty. All right, she said, her voice firming. I'll do it. But I have my own conditions. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Name them. First, no physical intimacy beyond what is absolutely necessary for the performance, she stated, her chin held high. Second, the job you offered. I want a real job, not just a token position. I have a degree in business administration and several years of experience in project management before Lily. He nodded slowly. Agreed. Your conditions are reasonable. We will sign a non-disclosure agreement and a contract outlining the terms. You and Lily will move into my penthouse this afternoon. We have a lot to prepare. Clara found herself swept into a whirlwind. The penthouse was breathtaking, a sprawling expanse of glass and steel overlooking the city. A nursery, already furnished with the finest crib and toys, awaited Lily. Clothes, elegant and expensive, filled a new wardrobe for Clara. It was a dream, a fantasy, yet it felt strangely hollow. She was living a lie, playing a part. Over the next few days, Damien meticulously coached her. He taught her about his family, their quirks and expectations. He explained the intricacies of Thorne Enterprises, the looming threat from Julian Vance. He was thorough, precise, and utterly professional. There was no flirtation, no personal overture. Their interactions were strictly business, yet a strange sense of camaraderie began to form between them. He watched her interact with Lily, a quiet intensity in his eyes. He never touched his daughter, but his gaze often lingered on the baby, a wistful expression on his usually stoic face. Clara found herself wondering about his past, about the sadness that seemed to cling to him like a shadow. The day of the family dinner arrived. Clara wore a sapphire gown, its silk caressing her skin. She felt like a stranger in her own reflection, a polished, elegant woman she barely recognized. Lily, dressed in a delicate lace romper, looked like a tiny angel. Damien took her hand as they entered the grand dining room. His touch was warm, reassuring. "Remember the plan," he murmured, his thumb stroking her knuckles. "Smile. Be charming. And don't let Julian get to you." The room was filled with Thorne family members, a formidable array of stern faces and piercing gazes. Julian Vance, Damien's cousin, was a slick, handsome man with a predatory gleam in his eyes. He greeted Clara with a dismissive nod, his smile not reaching his eyes. Damien's grandfather, Arthur Thorne, was a frail man, his eyes clouded with age, but a spark of warmth ignited when he saw Lily. "My great-granddaughter," he whispered, a tear rolling down his cheek as Damien carefully placed Lily in his arms. Clara watched the scene, a pang in her heart. This wasn't just about money for Damien. It was about family, about legacy, about a dying man's last wish. The dinner was a tense affair. Julian probed, his questions sharp and pointed, trying to find cracks in their fabricated story. He questioned Clara's background, her sudden appearance in Damien's life. But Clara, armed with Damien's coaching and her own quick wit, deflected his attacks with practiced ease. She spoke of a whirlwind romance, a desire for privacy, a deep connection that transcended conventional timelines. "It seems a rather sudden engagement, Damien," Julian remarked, his gaze lingering on Clara, "especially for a man who has always been so independent." "Sometimes, Julian, love finds you when you least expect it," Clara interjected, her voice sweet but firm. She squeezed Damien's hand, offering him a reassuring smile. He returned it, a flicker of genuine warmth in his eyes. Later that night, back in the penthouse, Clara felt a strange mix of exhilaration and exhaustion. They had pulled it off. The illusion was complete. "You were magnificent," Damien said, pouring them both a glass of sparkling water. "You handled Julian perfectly." "It was a performance," she said, shrugging. "I'm good at those when I have to be." He sat opposite her, his gaze intense. "Clara, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you before." Her heart tightened. Here it was, the real secret, the true reason behind his unusual request. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "My wife, she died 3 years ago. In a car accident. She was pregnant. We were expecting a daughter." His voice was raw, etched with pain. "I lost them both. My world shattered. I became a recluse, burying myself in work. That's why my grandfather became so concerned. He saw me withdrawing, closing myself off." Clara felt a wave of empathy wash over her. The sadness in his eyes, the way he looked at Lily, it all made sense now. He wasn't just trying to save his inheritance. He was trying to heal a wound that ran deeper than she could have imagined. "I'm so sorry, Damien," she whispered, her own eyes welling up. "When your text came through," he continued, his voice heavy, "and you mentioned a baby, a daughter, it felt like fate. A chance to give my grandfather what he wanted, and perhaps a chance for me to feel something again." He looked at her, his gaze vulnerable. "I know this is a business arrangement, Clara, but seeing you with Lily, seeing the love you have for her, it reminded me of what I lost, and what I could have had." Clara reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "You're a good man, Damien Thorne," she said softly. "A good man who's been through hell." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled with unspoken understanding. The barrier between them, built on secrecy and transaction, began to crumble. The next morning, Clara began her new job at Thorne Enterprises. She was assigned to a high-profile project, managing a team of seasoned professionals. Her skills, once dormant, quickly resurfaced. She thrived in the challenging environment, proving her worth with every successful presentation and strategic decision. Damien, her boss now, was demanding but fair, pushing her to excel. He saw her potential, and he nurtured it. Their professional relationship slowly morphed into something more personal. They would grab coffee together, discussing not just work, but life. He'd ask about Lily, genuinely interested in her milestones. Clara, in turn, found herself confiding in him, sharing her dreams for Lily's future, her struggles as a single mother. Julian Vance, however, remained a persistent shadow. He watched Clara, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. He spread rumors, questioning her qualifications, hinting at a scandalous relationship with Damien. Clara, now stronger and more confident, brushed off his attempts to undermine her. But a sense of unease lingered. Julian was relentless, and she knew he wouldn't give up easily. One afternoon, Clara received an anonymous email. It contained a series of fabricated documents, purporting to show her embezzling funds from Thorn Enterprises. The email threatened to expose her, to ruin her reputation, to take Lily away. Panic seized her. She knew it was Julian's work, a desperate attempt to discredit her and, by extension, Damien. She rushed to Damien's office, the email clutched in her trembling hand. He read it, his face darkening with fury. "He's escalating," Damien said, his voice dangerously low. "He's trying to frame you, to destroy everything." "What do we do?" Clara asked, her voice laced with fear. "This could ruin me. They could take Lily." "They won't," Damien vowed, his eyes blazing with protective anger. "I won't let them. We fight back. We expose him." They worked tirelessly, digging into Julian's past, searching for evidence of his own corrupt dealings. Clara, with her keen eye for detail and her project management skills, proved invaluable. She meticulously cross-referenced financial records, uncovered hidden transactions, and pieced together a mosaic of Julian's long history of corporate malfeasance. The climax arrived during a tense board meeting, called by Julian to force a vote of no confidence against Damien. Julian presented his fabricated evidence against Clara, painting her as a conniving opportunist, a threat to the company's integrity. "This woman," Julian sneered, pointing at Clara, "is nothing more than a gold digger, a con artist who has wormed her way into Damien's life, and now, into our company. She is a risk, a liability, and a disgrace." Clara's blood ran cold, but she met his gaze with unwavering defiance. "You're wrong, Julian," Damien said, his voice calm, but with an underlying steel that silenced the room. "Clara Hayes is a woman of integrity, intelligence, and unwavering loyalty, and she is far more valuable to this company than you could ever hope to be." He then presented his own evidence, a meticulously compiled dossier of Julian's illicit activities, his embezzlement, his attempts to sabotage Thorn Enterprises. Clara had found the crucial piece of evidence, a coded offshore account that linked Julian to years of fraudulent transactions. The boardroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Julian's face turned ashen, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before their eyes. "This is a lie," Julian roared, but his voice lacked conviction. "The evidence is irrefutable, Julian," Damien stated, his gaze cold and unforgiving. "You are finished, and I assure you, you will pay for every single one of your crimes." Julian was escorted out by security, his career and his freedom in tatters. The room slowly emptied, leaving Damien and Clara alone. Clara felt a surge of relief, followed by a profound sense of exhaustion. She had faced down a villain, protected her daughter, and helped the man who had, in turn, saved her. Damien walked towards her, his eyes filled with an emotion she hadn't seen before. He took her hands, his touch gentle. "We did it, Clara," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved me. You saved Thorn Enterprises. And you saved yourself." "We saved each other," she corrected, a soft smile gracing her lips. He pulled her closer, his gaze searching hers. "Clara," he began, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The contract, the one-night wife, it was just a pretense. But what we found, what we built together, it's real. I never thought I'd feel this way again. Never thought I'd find love or a family after what I lost. But you and Lily, you've brought light back into my life." Clara's heart fluttered. She had felt it too, this growing connection, this undeniable pull towards him. He was no longer just her savior, her boss, or her temporary husband. He was the man who saw her strength, who valued her mind, and who, despite his own pain, had opened his heart to her and her daughter. "I love you, Clara Hayes," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "Be my wife, not for one night, not for an inheritance, but for always. Be Lily's mother, and my partner, my everything." Tears streamed down Clara's face, tears of relief, of joy, of overwhelming love. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked. 1,000 times yes. He kissed her then, a tender, passionate kiss that sealed their unspoken vows, a promise of a future filled with love, laughter, and a family forged in the crucible of desperation and unexpected kindness. 6 months later, the scent of freshly baked bread filled the sprawling kitchen of their new home, a beautiful estate nestled in the quiet suburbs. Clara, now Mrs. Thorne, hummed a cheerful tune as she prepared Lily's breakfast. Lily, a vibrant toddler, giggled from her high chair, her tiny hands reaching for a toy. Clara was no longer just a project manager. She was the head of strategic partnerships at Thorne Enterprises, a role she thrived in. She had found her purpose, her professional fulfillment, alongside the profound joy of motherhood and a loving partnership. Damien walked in, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder, a soft smile gracing his lips. He leaned down, pressing a kiss to Clara's temple, then scooped Lily up, showering her with affectionate tickles. "Good morning, my loves," he murmured, his voice filled with contentment. "Another beautiful day." Clara watched him, her heart overflowing. She thought back to that desperate night, the empty formula can, the accidental text. It had been a moment of utter despair, a terrifying plunge into the unknown. But from that darkness, a miracle had emerged. Damien Thorne, the enigmatic billionaire, had stepped into her life, not as a predatory stranger, but as a wounded soul seeking redemption, a man who, despite his immense wealth, craved the simple warmth of family. She had found not just financial security, but a home, a partner, a love that transcended all expectations. Lily had a devoted father, and Clara had a future she could only have dreamed of. She had learned that sometimes, the most profound blessings arrive in the most unexpected packages, born from desperation, nurtured by kindness, and sealed by the unwavering power of love. Their life, once a fragile tightrope walk, was now a solid foundation, built on trust, respect, and an unbreakable bond.